Story 1. Someone had written their entire life story on the bathroom stall in permanent marker. It started with, "I am pregnant," and ended with, "He left me for my sister." The worst part was they came back weekly to add new chapters. It was like a horrible bathroom soap opera. Story 2. Someone decided to decorate the walls and floors with their fecal matter. Retail workers are not paid enough. Story 3. The toilet was clogged and overflowing, and someone still added to it as if it were a group project. Humanity is lost. Story 4. My colleague walked into the restroom at the pub where we worked and found someone deceased with a needle in their arm. Story 5. The inside of a toilet was clogged with feces and toilet paper rolls. Part of the toilet seat was coated in feces. Some people can be very unsanitary. Story 6. I was on my way to my hometown with my son, who was about 5 at the time. We stopped at a Bojangles to use the restroom, and he went into the men's room. He came right back out saying there were bugs on the floor. I opened the door slightly and saw the entire floor covered in roaches, about 30 or 40 of them. The surprising part was that someone was in the stall amidst it all. Story 7. While sweeping the men's restroom at my part-time job, I saw a large purple adult toy in the handicap stall. No waste, just a big rubber item sitting sideways in the toilet. It was the craziest thing I had seen in any restroom at the time. Story 8. I was working at a grocery store and went to use the women's restroom. When I walked in, I immediately noticed it smelled very bad. The odor was coming from one stall. I opened the door and saw feces everywhere, on the toilet and the walls, as if someone had sprayed diarrhea like a skunk. Story 9. The water was out at the Cancun airport on our return trip a few months ago. Toilets were piled up. I still hate to think of the people who had to handle that when the water was restored. Also, the portable toilets at music festivals are unmatched. Story 10. Back in 5th grade, I walked into the bathroom one day and discovered a kid charging people $1 to watch him lick the urinals. Story 11. I worked at Marks & Spencer for a year as a cleaner. Someone flushed a diaper and clogged every toilet in the building, causing the 7 public toilets to overflow with dirty water. I spent about 30 minutes trying to clear the toilets with mops, getting covered in unpleasant substances. Also, someone left a dirty diaper on the baby changing station. It was the most putrid smell I have ever encountered, comparable to the gas from a long-dead, rotting hedgehog. Then, one day, someone defecated all over the floors and walls in a toilet cubicle. Fortunately, my shift was about to end. Story 12. In a small park bathroom, about 4 by 5 feet, it appeared that someone had severe diarrhea and sprayed it everywhere. The only way I could imagine covering the entire room would be if they dropped their pants, spread their cheeks with their hands, bent over at a right angle, and forcefully expelled the contents while pivoting. It looked like someone had taken the business end of a pipe and slung the watery contents from 1 to 4 feet high on all 4 walls. I am not joking when I say I had to use the restroom badly. I opened the door, time seemed to slow, the sound of birds chirping, children playing, and passing cars faded out, replaced by the piercing ringing of tinnitus. I witnessed a brown, chowder-like, abstract anal art disaster on the white, inmate-painted concrete blocks. It was on the sink, mirrors, hand dryer, trash can, urinal, stall door, everywhere. My senses eventually returned as I stood, temporarily frozen in shock, horror, and amazement. I slowly backed away, letting the door to the restroom close, and walked back to my truck. I no longer felt the urge to go. In fact, I do not think I relieved myself for several more hours. This was in a beautiful little creekside park in Bayboro, North Carolina, in 2015. I still think of this often and pray for mercy on the unfortunate person who had the responsibility of cleaning that public restroom. Story 13. Someone had wiped their used sanitary pad along the cubicle walls and then stuck it above the toilet using the adhesive side. Story 14. I stood in front of the toilet. I could hear everything. One woman and 4 men came out, smelled bad, and almost everything was full. I hate highway toilets so much. Story 15. A pad with a decidual cast in it. It was a clot the size of my fist. I was very worried for whoever left that in the toilet along with the pad. Story 16. I used to work at a fancy high-rise hotel in a large tourist town. One of my jobs was shampoo girl. I would lug around a giant blue carpet cleaning machine that I named Babe to every floor to scrub stains off carpets. One day, I was working down in the basement. Down there are our conference rooms and access to the town's riverwalk. A man came out of the basement restroom, and since I was the first employee he could find, he explained that there was an absolute disaster in one of the stalls. I went to check it out, and in one stall, the toilet was completely filled with toilet paper and, on top of that, an obnoxious amount of excrement. I told the man I was going to need to get maintenance for this. As I told my buddy Ernest, he said casually, "Yep, we've got a balloon pooper. He has been here a few times, but we haven't caught him yet." Apparently, some man had been sneaking into the basement bathroom through the Riverwalk doors and using our bathroom to expel his drug balloons. First, he clogs the toilet so there is no chance he loses them down the drain. Eventually, security and police caught the man, but it took another month of this nonsense. Story 17. One time, in a small town outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, I looked in the mirror. Horrific. Story 18. Technically, it was a customer and employee bathroom, but everyone thinks it is a public restroom. A customer killed himself in the stall. Story 19. Cockroaches swimming in urine and soiled underwear. I am sure there may have been other things, but I probably blocked them out of memory, which is just as well. Story 20. Long ago, in the women's public restroom at the Times Square Tourist Center, it looked like there had been a murder. However, it was just menstrual blood and other fluids everywhere, along with a lot of urine and feces smeared on the floor, walls, and doors. I wondered how long it had been like that because the staff did not take any action when I informed them. Story 21. I was working as a custodian at a truck stop. The toilet sensor that flushed was broken. The truck drivers could not read the out-of-order sign and kept adding to the growing mess. You can imagine what my coworker and I had to do. Story 22. I was at a party and went into the bathroom where a woman was vomiting. I got in the stall next to her and noticed I could spell my name with her vomit. Earlier that day, she had eaten the alphabet and numbers. Story 23. The portable toilet at a music festival in 1999 had a pyramid of feces about 4 inches above the seat, used menstrual pads stuck to the walls, and a gray, feces-smeared sweatshirt next to the toilet seat. Story 24. I'll never forget working at a restaurant. It was my night to clean the bathrooms. I walked in and a stall was locked. I looked over at the stalls. Someone had left a very large bowel movement. It was too large for the toilet drain and long enough to come out of the water. It was the size of an armadillo. The manager had to break it up and flush it because there was no way I was going to do that. Story 25. My wife and I went to China Beach in San Francisco once for a memorial service. While on the beach, my wife had stomach cramps and urgently needed to use the toilet. The public restrooms were closed because they had been vandalized, so the city had placed a couple of portable toilets. As the dutiful husband, I went to check them out for her, and they were the most disgusting toilets I have ever seen. There was urine and feces everywhere, on the seats, floors, and walls. It was like standing in a sewage pipe. There was some paper, so I wiped down the least dirty of the two as quickly and thoroughly as I could for her. It was still very nasty, but she went in out of necessity. She still thanks me for that. Story 26. A poop so big we searched the building in case someone had done that and then died. We were honestly concerned they had crawled under a stock rail or into a storage room to pass away. If by some miracle we had managed to flush it, it would have been declared a hazard to shipping the moment it hit the sea, and the Royal Navy would have had to sink it. It was carried out of there in 2 separate rubbish bags. We never found the culprit, victim, or mother. I hope they made it. Story 27. I attended a Slayer concert in Ventura, California in the 2000s. 15 minutes before Slayer took the stage to perform, I went to use the bathroom and was astonished at what I witnessed. The men's bathroom stall doors were kicked off their hinges and lying on the floor. On top of the toilet tank was a tower of feces at least 3 feet high from the tank, not the bowl, meaning people actually added to the existing pile as it went along. This was in addition to all the feces on the walls around the toilet bowl, and the toilet seat itself. I will never forget informing the venue's security team about it as I left the concert area to cross the street to a nearby restaurant to use their bathroom. As this was obviously not a bathroom I intended to use even in an emergency. The security team refused my entry back into the show while Slayer was performing, until I told them, "Guys, look at the bathroom. That is why I left. Just go upstairs and look at it. Come back and tell me I am lying." They came back and promptly let me back into the show to see Slayer, much to the dismay of many fans who saw me go back in as they waited outside and yelled insults at me for some bizarre, unwarranted reason. I smiled and went back in and enjoyed the remainder of the show. Good times. Story 28. Someone once stuck their genital through a peephole in a bathroom cubicle that I was sitting in, and it was very small. Story 29. Worked as a security guard at the Ottawa Congress Center for 4 days. I walked into a bathroom to do a patrol check and encountered a male sex worker selling his services. I did not return the next day. Story 30. There is a myth among the community that men's toilets are always worse than women's. My partner runs her own cleaning company. Helping her out one day, I walked into the women's restroom to clean it. Oh my God, it was a war zone. A wet, bloody, smelly war zone. Story 31. Someone broke the chain on the sink stopper, urinated in the sink, and then defecated in it. They also wiped themselves on the cloth hand dryer. Then that person wrote on the wall, "Forget your pay toilet." But they were caught because their mother, who worked there, had to clean it up and recognize their handwriting. I received punishment for that incident. Story 32. Worked in a bar when I was younger. I was the new employee, so I was sent to clean the mess someone had just made in the urinal. I have a sensitive gag reflex, so I ended up vomiting on top of the mess. Cleaned the vomit-covered mess out of a urinal filled with urine. Story 33. Feces smeared all over the wall from a wheelchair-bound individual with mental challenges who then came out holding his feces-filled pants in his hand. He threw them on the floor and exited in his wheelchair without pants. Story 34. Blood smeared on stall walls, toilet, and floor, along with a used sanitary pad stuck to the back wall. There were handprints in the blood. A used bloody condom was hanging off the toilet seat. Yes, it was the men's room. Story 35. Once, I went into a public toilet and saw a huge glob of mucus sitting on the flush handle. It genuinely put me off using public toilets for some years. Story 36. An elderly woman left the restroom, and I entered. I noticed a lump of green mucus on the seat that must have come from her. Story 37. Working at a water park. Once in the women's restroom, a girl declared her love for her boyfriend in large letters written on the wall, possibly in her own or someone else's feces. Story 38. I was the one who did the most disgusting thing in a public bathroom. I went to a fancy meat restaurant where they cut the giant steak off the bone in front of you. I overindulged and then had to take a bus and a train home. Between the two, the grumbles in my upper and lower stomach started. I ran to the bathroom, pulled my pants down just in time to vomit into the toilet, and had projectile diarrhea on the wall and door. It was the last train to my home, 2 hours away, in the middle of winter, so I had to leave it and run for the train before it left. There was a cleaner between the train and the bathroom, so I stopped to apologize and tell him about the mess. Story 39. I was at a popular bar and club using the bathroom. The stalls had really tall door rails. You would have to stand on the toilet seat and still stand on tiptoe to reach the top rail. Tied up, there was a very used tampon. That took a bit of dedication. Story 40. Disney World, the 1950s restaurant bathroom. My child was in there for a long time, so I went to check on him. As soon as I opened the door, it smelled unpleasant. I looked towards the stalls and saw an employee looking quite confused about how to proceed, because it appeared as if a mess had occurred inside one of the stalls. Someone bending over to sit down had sprayed waste all over the toilet and high up the wall behind the toilet. The employee waved at me that it was okay to come in, and I said I was just checking on my child. My child said he was almost done in one of the other stalls. Our food arrived as my child came back to the table, and all he wanted to talk about while we were trying to eat was how bad the bathroom was. I kept giggling, but his mother told him to stop. I understand, because that was probably the most traumatic thing he has seen so far in life. Story 41. I did my driver's education training in a strip mall that was clearly owned by an absentee landlord who did not care about investing in upkeep or maintenance. The public bathroom was the center of the misery. It was a dimly lit area with a strong, unpleasant odor. My classes were in the evenings, so it was always dark. Inside the men's bathroom, someone had boldly written an offensive phrase on the wall. It remained there as long as I attended. Story 42. I had Taco Bell for lunch and 6 sliders at Crystal for dinner. I am still in therapy after seeing that. Story 43. No joke, Eras tour Stockholm. Walked into the bathroom during the show, not a soul around. The smell was something I had never smelled before. Wretched. Someone purposely left their soap tampon on the floor. Not in the stall, but right in the middle of the floor. There are small bins that all women know about to dispose of properly. Story 44. There is a film on YouTube about the incidents in a Mansfield public restroom that the police recorded while trying to solve the murder of 2 young girls. In Police Academy, we saw the uncensored version, which depicted only explicit male interactions. Story 45. Feces were on the toilet seat with smears all over the stall walls. Not only was it smeared, but there were actual handprints, resembling art. Story 46. A used condom was found in the men's restroom. This occurred in the public restrooms of a busy train station, making any discreet occurrence impossible. Story 47. I work at a water park. At the end of the day, I clean the restrooms, so I have seen many things. The worst is probably Story 48. Some very obviously used children's underwear. I'll let you guess what used means here to make it the most disgusting. Story 49. I walked into a stall at the mall, and someone had somehow managed to get feces on the ceiling. I still lie awake at night wondering about the logistics of that situation. Story 50. Someone had somehow managed to get feces on top of the toilet tank. Not the seat. Not the lid. The tank. Did they climb it? Was this a protest? I still have questions. Story 51. Worked in fast food during school and had to clean bathrooms. One day, someone left a 13 by 4-inch log in a toilet. The plumber was called. Worked at a print place in British Columbia, and a customer informed me that someone had gone vandalizing in the women's bathroom. It was bloody disgusting. It looked like a slasher movie. Hazmat had to be called. Story 52. Saw a woman walk to the sink with her underwear and pants around her ankles to wet the toilet paper to wipe herself. Story 53. Either defecate on the floor next to the toilet, or a man passed out with a needle in his arm at separate times. Story 54. It was at the airport in Chicago. Someone had defecated heavily, and it was all over the stall walls, floor, and toilet. The toilet was completely clogged. I can't imagine how anyone could have defecated that much. It is comparable to a large hotel I worked at in Portland, Oregon. The basement had meeting rooms and the office where I worked, which wasn't very busy on the weekends. I went into the ladies' room, which had about 20 stalls and a large area with couches and mirrors for primping. There was feces smeared on everything. Someone must have brought it in. The amount was astonishing. Story 55. Year-and-a-half-old dried feces covered the floor to ceiling and 75% of the bathroom surfaces. I worked at a thrift store, and instead of cleaning it when it happened, they just shut the door. When I was hired, I was shown the room and lost my lunch in the parking lot. Story 56. The toilet has a tampon with blood. I was rushing to the public bathroom because I needed to use the toilet, but when I saw it, the urge went away. Story 57. There are 2 regulars at my job. An elderly woman and her middle-aged child. The woman needed help using the restroom, and sometimes they did not quite make it. I had to clean the bathroom, and when I walked in, I found what at first looked and smelled like horse manure. That tiny elderly woman had the largest bowel movement I have ever seen, in a pile right in front of the toilet, very close to it. I stood near it to clean it and then vomited into the toilet. I turned around to a stall without any mess and vomited a second time. I decided not to clean it myself and asked a coworker to help. I am very thankful they assisted me. I still cannot understand how she had that much waste. Story 58. Public toilets were no longer flushing and were piled high with waste and paper. They were also crawling with maggots. Story 59. A toilet bowl full of urine that was as yellow as a pitcher of lemonade with floating pieces of feces. Story 60. Worked at Lowe's and someone defecated all over the toilet, floor, and walls. Volunteered to clean it because everyone else was not willing to help. Story 61. I went into a stall in a shopping mall once, and someone had stuck individual sheets of toilet paper randomly around the walls like some kind of Andy Warhol pop art. They obviously did not have any adhesive putty, so they used brown tack instead. Could possibly have won a Turner Prize. Story 62. I have witnessed more unpleasant situations in places where they should never occur than one can imagine. Some of the worst involved women's sanitary boxes, specifically at a state park where I worked. I recall one container filled with bloody pads, which is understandable, but also a heavily soiled diaper that seemed out of place and appeared not to be from a child. Additionally, someone had vomited into it. The smell was extremely foul, and the biohazard level far exceeded what I was compensated to manage. I have also discovered a few people passed out who I initially thought were deceased. It was both disgusting and sad in a different way. One individual was in the middle of changing his pants, with 2 large bottles of pills visible in his jacket. Story 63. A man defecated in the sink at the car dealership where I used to work. It was an elderly gentleman who came in regularly. Each time he went to the bathroom, feces ended up somewhere other than the toilet. Story 64. Well, not quite a public toilet. Anyway, here it is. At a festival, my friend was very drunk and had his hoodie tied around his waist. He went to the portable toilet to poop and forgot his jumper. We had lost him at this point and found him in the morning in his tent with a hoodie covered in what we assumed was multiple variants of poop. The smell was another level, and his tent and half its contents were ruined. Apparently, he partied for a few hours after the poop incident, and people kept avoiding him. He did not know why at the time. Story 65. My husband went into a public bathroom at a Sheetz gas station, and an older man had obviously defecated all over himself. He was standing in front of the sink with no pants on, his genital area exposed near the edge of the sink. He was rinsing his soiled pants and underwear in the sink, making a mess. My husband couldn't believe it. We felt bad because things like this do happen, and what are you supposed to do? However, getting naked and rinsing soiled clothes in a public space is probably not the appropriate way to handle it. Story 66. In a busy, rush-hour train station, I went to the one empty urinal. Being in need, I started immediately. After a few seconds, I realized that the man next to me at the end stall was masturbating into the urinal. I wanted to unsee it, to stop and get out of there. But I could do neither. I had to finish my own business and leave as quickly as I could. Story 67. They tried to flush period products down the toilet. They were not successful, and the bathroom was out of commission for a while until maintenance could remove all the wrappers. That is genuinely the first time I have ever seen that happen. It was like, oh my God, all those signs and warnings have a purpose. There really are people who are stupid enough to try this. Story 68. This is quite mild, but when I was about to lose control, all of the stalls in the women's bathroom were covered with urine and feces. The first stall had urine on the floor. The second and third stalls were literally unflushed. Story 69. Mars Bar, New York City. Generally unpleasant. There are always needles and empty drug packets, with the occasional person using drugs. Story 70. We had to close the men's bathroom because it appeared someone had made a severe mess in the toilet. A couple of my coworkers went to check the situation, but a man was using the restroom. Story 71. Back in college, we had someone famous for causing destruction in the bathrooms of one of the campus buildings. The Phantom Shitter. I have since worked as a clinician in an emergency room, Medicaid clinic, and a jail, and nothing came close to this level of damage. Most men's bathrooms are pretty unpleasant. Some people choose not to flush for reasons I do not understand. One night, halfway through a late class, I went to the bathroom. I was entering the phantom shitter's domain but planned to use only the urinals, so I thought I would be relatively safe. That's when I saw my roommate sneak out from one of the stalls, briefly rinse their hands, and head back to class. I did not hear a flush. My roommate had poor personal hygiene, likely because they went bald early and seemed to have given up. Their diet was disgusting, consisting mostly of boxes of zebra cakes and expensive campus sushi rolls that had been sitting in a cooler for hours. I never saw them drink water. These factors contributed to a digestive process that must have been extremely harsh. I knew this because they used about a roll of toilet paper a day and never changed the roll. Even so, I did not think they were the phantom shitter. In hindsight, I probably should not have looked. I did not need the information, but like a Lovecraft protagonist, I had to know, even if what I saw was disturbing. My roommate had left the bathroom utterly destroyed. The mess looked like someone had torn through 8 spicy Italian sausages. Brown mixed with red, some still attached and others shredded in a half-solid, half-chunky way. There was so much that I wondered if my roommate had made multiple trips to create a pile that nearly crested above the bowl. Then the smell hit me. Story 72. Someone defecated and urinated on the floor. I am talking about feces and a large puddle of urine on the floor. Story 73. At my job, we work with about 8 people, and someone has been throwing their literal feces and toilet paper in the trash. I am not talking about just a small skid mark. I am talking about someone putting toilet paper on their hand, then putting feces in their hand and squashing it. Story 74. I was on a work detail in the army cleaning toilets when one of the soldiers called us over to the stall he was cleaning. All of us on the detail stopped and stared in silence. There was a piece of feces so large it was sticking up straight from the water. It was almost the height of the rim of the toilet. I also saw someone create a Jackson Pollock-style mess on the wall of a Walmart bathroom. Story 75. The largest stool I have ever seen in my life was in the women's freshman dorm communal bathroom. It was literally the size of a metal water bottle. I was almost impressed that someone passed that. Story 76. Absolutely disgusting filth, mess, and smell. The lone ground floor parking structure bathroom was the neatest ground zero in New York City. We visited about 2 years after September 11, 2001. It was worse than my description. The only thing missing was the dead body with the syringe still in his arm. I went in with my wife to make sure she did not touch anything. We both urinated standing up. Story 77. Saw a stool the size of a baby's arm. That was almost 25 years ago, and I have never been back to that diner. Story 78. A truck stop bathroom stall had an unflushed toilet with diarrhea that contained blood, and some was also on the seat. Not as disgusting but pretty hilarious. When I was in high school, a legend left an 8-inch log in one of the urinals. Story 79. A homeless man riding his motorcycle. Bathroom stalls had no doors, so my dad had to hold the door while I tried to use the restroom. Story 80. Someone soiled their pants, then proceeded to use each of the 4 stalls. In the first stall, there were heavily soiled shorts and underwear with a chunky stain on the seat. In each consecutive stall, there were similar stains on the seats, each one fainter than the last. I was a dishwasher at a restaurant at the time, 15 years old, and the bathrooms were public use, located in the same building as the restaurant. One of the chefs asked me to clean the bathroom, knowing what I was about to encounter. Luckily, they were joking and did not expect me to actually clean it, or I would have quit on the spot. Story 81. Somebody entered our office building, went into the bathroom, and smeared feces everywhere. It looked like it was used like a crayon on the mirrors. Story 82. Have you ever seen Terrifier? Sometimes people paint pictures of Art the Clown on restroom walls. I have seen it a few times. Story 83. People wearing gloves to the bathroom during coronavirus disease and not washing the gloves or their hands after using it. Story 84. A man with a serious weight problem had diarrhea, and it splattered several feet up the wall behind the toilet. I used the downstairs men's restroom for the rest of the week. Story 85. One morning, while camping at Darien Lake State Park, I walked into a shower stall that a boy around 12 years old had just exited. There was a used tampon sitting on the soap tray, likely left from a quick situation the previous night. Story 86. Worked at a convenience store in Charleston, South Carolina when I was 19. I went to clean the restrooms at the end of my shift and saw blood and feces all over the walls, floors, and ceiling. How did that happen? Couldn't clean it. I left immediately. It was very gross. I do not know how this person could walk out of the restroom with that much blood loss. It was beyond me. I never saw anything suspicious during my shift either. Even after 32 years, it still creeps me out to think of it. Story 87. In the stall next to me, I hear a person opening a bag of chips and then crunching on a handful of them. Story 88. Feces piled above the rim in a hostel bathroom. I was suddenly okay not using the bathroom for another day or two. Story 89. Feces smeared on the wall above the toilet and across the stall door in the grocery store where I worked. I was never so happy that day not to be a manager, since only they were allowed to handle biohazards. The manager was not very happy. Story 90. Had to stop at a highway gas station while traveling. I grabbed the key from the attendant, went into the restroom, and saw that someone had defecated in a bucket right beside the toilet. The toilet looked fine. They must have chosen to use the bucket instead. Suddenly, I didn't feel the need to urinate anymore. I returned the key to the attendant and informed him about the situation. He probably thought I was the one who did it. Story 91. I remember going into a Burger King bathroom one evening, and it looked like a giant had picked up a portable toilet and shook it. Story 92. I saw a woman cough up mucus directly into her own open palm just before rinsing her hands without soap. This was in a corporate office bathroom. Story 93. Someone had made a small pile of feces right next to the toilet. It was as if they went out of their way to find a bathroom, then just squatted next to it and defecated. Story 94. Times Square, New York City, probably around 1993, I went into a restaurant bathroom. It was a single occupancy bathroom and 5 people came out. I walked in to see 2 clear footprints on the seat, along with diarrhea and urine. The second incident was in a grocery store where I used to work around 1992. Someone had explosive diarrhea that did not go into the toilet. It was on the back wall, the stall walls, the plumbing, and the floor underneath the toilet. They called maintenance. He looked at it, said, "I quit," and walked out. The third was similar. A small business I worked for had no public restrooms, so it was definitely one of the employees. There was liquid diarrhea everywhere. Walls, floor, dripping down the tank. The small business had no maintenance staff. The head mechanic, a very pragmatic man, dressed in full rain gear, the type worn when washing the inside of trucks. He got the power washer, opened the bathroom door, and from about 20 to 30 feet away sprayed down the entire bathroom. Our boss asked about damage to the drywall, and George said, "If you want to try cleaning it a different way, I can stop and let you take over." The boss decided the drywall could tolerate a little water after all. Story 95. Someone smeared feces all over the walls, floor, sink, and toilet at one of my previous jobs. I declined to clean that up without proper personal protective equipment. Story 96. Retail worker here. Not sure if we upset someone, but we had a person in the customer bathroom smear feces everywhere. The toilet lid, the toilet base with hand smears, the handicap railing, the toilet paper holder, the sink, and the trash can. I was the one to clean it. Story 97. I was a commercial building supervisor in Manhattan in the late 1990s and early 2000s. My company, ABM Industries Incorporated, maintained the World Trade Center and the bathrooms in the train station below. We were also responsible for Grand Central Terminal, including the bathrooms and the platforms. On Saturday and Sunday mornings, the amount of bodily fluids, used condoms, and waste all over the place was remarkable, resembling a Jackson Pollock painting. We used hoses for cleaning. At one point, a man who worked nights approached me and begged us to remove the stall doors to stop anonymous sexual activity and to please block the glory hole again. Story 98. A toilet covered in feces and a very used sanitary pad stuck to the cubicle wall. Not sure which was worse. Story 99. When I worked at Big Lots a few years ago, we had a rather bloody incident in the women's restroom. It was around the holidays and we were busy. A customer approached me and told me there was blood in the women's bathroom. I gathered supplies to clean it, thinking it was just a little bit of menstrual blood on the toilet or floor. I went in and what I saw is forever seared into my memory. I looked over at the sinks. One sink was full of pooled blood with a trail leading to the accessible stall. I opened the stall door, and it looked like a murder scene. Blood was pooled on the floor, on the walls, in the toilet, just everywhere. No one was inside, and we didn't see any blood anywhere else in the store. With the amount of blood present, there was no way a living person would be walking around. I sent employees to look around to see if anyone needed medical assistance, but we never found anyone. The woman who told us about it didn't look like she left all that blood there. My manager and I ended up cleaning it up. Big Lots didn't have anyone contracted for biohazard cleanup and advised us not to call the police. Poor management. 2 hours and 4 gallons of bleach later, it was like nothing had happened. Story 100. Sneaker prints on the toilet where they stood and shot their feces at the wall behind the toilet. Who does this? This is not a one-time occurrence. In my store, it happens about once a week. I can't imagine what they would do if someone walked in on them doing this. I would think there would be all sorts of noises involved in doing this. I would be embarrassed for them if I walked in and saw or heard this. Story 101. A piece of waste, half black, half white, like the cookie. I took a photo because I wanted to believe it. However, I deleted it out of disgust and never showed it to anyone. Story 102. Went to the Dominican Republic. Rented a motorcycle and went to Sujua Beach. By the time we got there, we had diarrhea. We found a public bathroom on the beach. Apparently, many people before us had the same problem. There was no way anyone would sit on the seats. You can imagine how it looked in there. Story 103. Not me, but my partner saw a man walk up to a urinal that had just been used and flushed, put his hands into the water and took a drink. Story 104. Just yesterday, I was at Costco, and someone defecated all over the floor in one of the stalls. It looked like a septic tank exploded. Story 105. Years ago at an amusement park, I saw a woman who washed her hands, then grabbed a bunch of paper towels, grabbed the front of her stretchy pants, and proceeded to put her hand down her pants, rubbing up and down vigorously to dry herself off or something. Story 106. Men. Public bathrooms do not start out nasty, but men make them that way and they teach their children the same nasty habits. They do not flush, do not lift the lid, do not wash their hands, and dribble all over the floor. Utterly disgusting. Story 107. Used tampons stuck to walls, hidden inside the toilet paper dispenser, and under the seat for a cleaner to find. Women's bathrooms are consistently dirtier than men's. Story 108. A small-town bully was having his way with a poor traveler who was crossing the country in a van that looked like a big dog. Story 109. I was on a road trip and stopped at a public highway restroom. The first person to open the door started gagging and said it was so bad that the rest of us had to see. It ended with the 4 of us dry heaving on the grass. It was 30 degrees above, middle of summer, so it had time to really bake in and set. What did we see? Feces on the walls, all over the floor, and on the roof. There wasn't an inch of that bathroom not covered in feces, like a thick layer of baked residue. We still talk and laugh about this bathroom. Story 110. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese's over 10 years ago, and kids would paint with paint all over the walls. Please control your children. Story 111. I experienced severe diarrhea after eating something bad. I had to buy new underwear and clothes at Walmart while dealing with the discomfort. It was very unpleasant. Story 112. Arterial blood was fresh and still dripping. I assume someone was injecting into their neck after not being able to find a vein. It was literally everywhere. It was in a Burger King. Story 113. I worked in retail. I cleaned many public restrooms. Hands down, the dirtiest and most disgusting bathrooms were always the women's rooms. Always. Story 114. This is my time to shine, unfortunately. I worked at a gas station, working from 8 p.m. to 7 a.m. A man came in and left the beer he bought with me to use the bathroom. About 30 minutes later, he took the beer and left. Whatever, there's a book on it, everyone uses the bathroom. A bit later, another man opened the bathroom door and vomited. He informed me there was a mess everywhere. I thought it wasn't that bad. But he was right. It was literally everywhere. The man had left his boxers on the floor and, I assume, sprayed feces all over the place. It was high and low on floors, walls, sinks, and toilets. I closed the door and put up a sign. There was no way to clean this by hand. I was right, they had to use a water hose to blast out the bathroom. I will never forget that image. Story 115. A foreign tourist group was lined up at the bathroom, and someone among them either could not hold it, did not understand the function of a urinal, or a combination of both. Story 116. At a place I used to work, someone took out their tampon and wrote, "Forget you," name of workplace, on the stall wall with it. Story 117. This was in school during 8th grade. The public restroom is public. I was going to use the bathroom just to waste time out of boredom until I saw a perfectly shaped piece of feces on the floor near the toilet. I had to go to the front office and inform the office lady so the janitor could clean up the mess. After that, I went back to class without wasting any more time. Janitors deserve the respect they have since they always clean up our messes. Story 118. If the service is bad or slow, I make sure to go to the restroom and urinate in the trash can. Sometimes I also scratch obscenities into the wall. Story 119. Toilets that have feces in them because someone did not flush. Also, just the smell in general makes me want to gag. Story 120. Someone did not want to sit on the toilet, so they squatted on the seat and released about 5 days worth of waste. Unfortunately, they missed the toilet bowl, and it all piled up on the back of the seat about 6 to 7 inches high. It was summer, and this mess had been there for about 3 to 4 days. The smell was very strong. Story 121. At work, in our shared one-person bathroom, there was a stain smear at least 10 feet up on the wall. I do not want to know how or why it got up there, but I strongly dislike the person responsible. Story 122. I worked at a Tractor Supply. A person struggling with addiction came in, bought a needle used for horses, and tried to inject drugs. I guess the needle was too thick, so he squirted blood everywhere but eventually managed. There was so much blood, and he also decided to leave feces on the floor. Story 123. When I was 20 and just out of jail, I got a job working at a fast food restaurant in a rough part of town. We often had homeless people come in and order the cheapest item on the menu so they could sit there and set up camp all day. We always had to eventually ask them to leave, and some would throw a fit. One Friday night at 8 p.m., the restaurant was pretty busy inside. I was expediting orders when a man, who was there with his 3 children, came to tell me someone had passed out in the men's bathroom. I am a woman, so I did the obligatory knock twice and asked, "Hello, are you okay?" There was no response. I went inside and saw the man was blue, with his entire body having a strange blue and purple hue. He was face down in his own vomit, with blood pooling around his face. It turned out he had injected heroin on the toilet, sat there too long, and fell face first off the toilet when he overdosed. I had to close the restaurant so paramedics could come in and try to save him, but he did not make it. Story 124. A morbidly obese man died of a heart attack on the toilet. He had a homemade sexual device inserted and had fallen face first. The material he was using for stimulation was illegal to possess and graphic. The stall walls had to be removed to get him out. Story 125. Someone dumped the biggest log ever. It stuck up above the toilet seat at least 4 inches, about the diameter of a 1-liter bottle. I wondered how. This was at a California National Park campground about 25 years ago. There were no digital cameras back then, or I would have taken a photo as proof. Story 126. When I worked as a busboy, a man soiled his pants and tucked his underwear away in the corner of a bathroom stall. I had to clean it up. Story 127. The men's bathroom at an old job of mine used to have a booger wall. People kept adding to it continuously. Story 128. Used needles and smeared feces on the walls. I used to work at a Fazoli's restaurant, and we had a challenging time cleaning up that mess in the men's bathroom. Story 129. EasyJet 6-hour flight to Cape Verde. The cabin crew made an announcement asking everyone not to flush baby wipes down the toilet because it causes blockages. People did not listen, and the toilets became blocked. I had to use the toilet before the blockage was announced, and there was a large pyramid of waste almost higher than the rim of the toilet. This happened only 2 hours into the flight. Story 130. One time I went into a Tim Hortons in Winnipeg, and in the bathroom there was blood in the toilet and 2 used syringe needles. Story 131. Not me, but some reckless behavior on top of the garbage can that was right next to the toilet at the McDonald's where my friend worked. Story 132. Puddles of blood were everywhere. The toilet, urinal, and sink were covered. The mirror was covered. Blood was dripping down every wall, even the ceiling. Police found a needle in one of the puddles, so most likely someone was injecting drugs in the bathroom and blew a vein before sneaking out. I always wondered how and what happened to them because the amount of blood was extraordinary. If it wasn't 6 liters, it certainly looked like it. Story 133. I have seen diarrhea spread all across the walls at least 10 feet above the ground. I still wonder how that is possible. I was disgusted and traumatized to the core. Story 134. When I was a maintenance lead for a college student union, the women's restrooms were much worse than the men's. Absolutely vile. Except for one time when there was a man in a stall with an open door, engaging in inappropriate behavior and making aggressive eye contact. Story 135. I was grocery shopping one day when my son said he needed to use the bathroom. I took him to the bathroom, and under one of the stalls, I saw the shadow of a man engaging in inappropriate behavior. This happened in a crowded bathroom on a random Tuesday afternoon. Story 136. In Greece in the 1990s, there was fecal matter and urine on the walls and wet yellow stains all over the floor in a restaurant bathroom. There were 2 footprints to stand on and do whatever business you needed to do. Public bathrooms were scarce, so there was not a lot of choice. I would hang my purse around my neck and touch nothing. The smell was atrocious. Anytime I was out and about, I would look for a McDonald's if I could and stay within walking distance. It was the one thing I hated about Greece. Story 137. Worked at a grocery store for 8 years. I was asked on my way back from lunch to take care of a mess in the men's back bathroom. I didn't even open the door before the putrid smell was already seeping from the cracks around the frame. I went inside holding my breath. The mess looked as though someone lost the battle the very second his waistline passed his cheeks. He missed the entire toilet bowl but somehow covered the wall behind the toilet and left an enormous puddle in front of it. For about 2 months, either every day or every other day early in the morning, a man would come right as the store opened and use the front men's handicapped bathroom stall to cover the bottom of the toilet bowl with a combination of feces and toilet paper. It would take me at least 30 to 45 minutes to clean everything and plunge until it finally all went down. Eventually, the man was discovered and either banned from the store or the behavior stopped. At first, I thought maybe someone had a grudge against the store and this was their way of lashing out. Story 138. Someone successfully made a poop hammock inside a stall. It was inside a 7-Eleven bathroom. I think the first one I ever saw was on Reddit years ago. I am still perplexed about how it is accomplished. Story 139. Not me, but my good friend used to work in a bar where a group of mostly older people came to drink beer every day. Many of them were alcoholics, but honestly, many were nice. One day, one of these people, a woman, had to use the bathroom. She decided to use the staff bathroom and defecated right in the middle of the floor, about 1 meter from the toilet. Why? Story 140. I once went into the toilets at Euston Station in London. All of the cubicles were closed except one. I went over to it and quickly realized why it was open. Whoever was in there previously must have done some kind of challenge involving severe diarrhea. There was liquid waste not only on the seat and floor but also sprayed up the back wall, and some of it had splattered the sidewalls too. I can only guess that someone must have stood on the seat and released a stream of explosive diarrhea, or they struggled to get their pants off in time and had an accident when their body was angled slightly upward. I walked away to wait for the next cubicle to become available, when a small, elderly toilet attendant shuffled around the corner. I saw him walk up in front of the cubicle, put his head in his hands, and say, "Oh no! Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye."